Hey, welcome to Genre Chat Podcast for SeriousWriter.com. I'm Caleb Walton, and tonight our guest is Molly Jo Realy. How are you doing, Molly?
I'm good, John Boy. How are you?
I'm good. A little bit of backstory. Molly and I have been friends for about 2 or 3 years now, and that is her designated nickname for me, writer, last name Walton.
Exactly.
It was bound to happen eventually.
Indeed it was. Yeah.
Well, Molly, tell us a little bit about yourself, the different things you're involved in, and about your upcoming release. I know you've got a book coming out in the next week or so.
I do. My name is Molly Jo Realy. So you think you're John Boy. I am, oh, really? A little bit too long in my life. It is spelled with one L. So, it's just Molly Jo Realy. I am a writer, author, coach, editor, media consultant, and marketing guru. I also run social media for several other authors, and that is kind of what I do. I currently am in the process of launching my first novel. I've been working on it for 7 years, and don't let that scare you because people say, I can't wait 7 years to get published. I took a lot of time off in between that to raise my daughter, see her graduate high school, get married, move away, and then I myself moved cross country. So I would say ultimately it really only took me legitimately maybe 2.5 to 3 years of constant effort to finish my book, and it's soon to be released, hopefully by the end of June.
So this is your baby.
This is my baby, and yeah. And I will also tell all aspiring writers out there that it is very true when they say you cannot edit your own stuff. Pay to have it professionally edited by somebody else. You will thank your future self for it.
You do freelance editing, and you've got someone else to professionally edit it for you.
That is correct. I have done professional freelance editing for 5 years, and I have a stable of clients that are my go-to favorites as well as new projects. But I knew enough to know that I was too close to this project, and I'm very grateful that I hired a wonderful editor, Yolanda Smith, who you and I both know through the Blue Ridge conferences, and she found not errors or necessarily typos, although there were some of those, but just great story and character references. Like, I don't think this character would say or do that, or could you have them do it this way? If you presented the character story A, then this falls apart in storyline B. So she really helped me find those little things. I was too busy telling the story just to get it out there, and she really helped me weave it together. She calls herself the Book Midwife, which is exactly what it is. She says the authors do all the work. She just helps us give birth to it. So,
and honestly, that's for anyone. In our minds, we already know everything. So we're not looking for, as a reader coming from it fresh, what is your first impression of this person? How does this flow? Because we already know everything already. There's no surprises for us. So we don't know how everything is going to come off.
Right. And that was part of the problem I was having in the end, because I had read and reread and written my story, but I also had written several versions of this or that scene and then shifted them. So it got to the point where in my mind, I knew everything, even stuff that was no longer in the book. And she came along and said, like in chapter 5, this doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Well, of course not. It makes sense in chapter 18, but not in chapter 5. So, well, then find a way to hint at it, but not put it in chapter 5 or whatnot. So editors are very good at helping you streamline the story that you need to tell.
Exactly. Well, what is NOLA? Tell us a little bit about it. What genre? I know you said it's a romantic mystery location novel.
It is. So the back blurb is this. So this is New Orleans. The past never stays buried. After an abusive relationship and the death of her beloved uncle, Penny finds herself in New Orleans, embroiled in a murderous love story. In search of something she can't identify, she discovers things aren't always as they seem. Somewhere between the French Quarter and the bayous, she finds the answers she's looking for, and some she's not. And now she must uncover the truth between the lies. So
New Orleans is such a rich setting for especially a murder mystery and a romance. There's so much of that almost backstreet, the voodoo and the beignets and everything. It's got so much to it already.
So much. It was really interesting. First of all, NOLA started as an idea where I thought it would be a neat name for a character who came out of New Orleans or live that kind of gypsy bohemian lifestyle. So that's the autobiographical part. I'm a bit known to be a bit bohemian in my life.
Well, plus your character's middle name is Joe also, isn't it?
Yes. And honestly, some of my friends do call me Penny because I have a real fascination with finding pennies on the path when I'm out and about. I have a little booklet on Amazon called The Penny Parable. It just talks about, just finding the little treasures in everyday life. So yeah, that part's autobiographical. So how I came about it, it originally started as a murder mystery. I didn't know what I was writing. I was just writing. And then I went to a writers group in California, and these two amazing speakers were there that I became friends with one of them. But listening to them speak, I realized, ooh, I'm writing a mystery. And the more I worked at it, I realized I kind of created location mystery. And I'll get to that in a minute. But then after I turned it over to my editor, she came to me just a few months ago. Now, remember, I said at the beginning, I've been working on this for 7 years. This is a mystery location or a location mystery. This is my baby. And she says, yeah, it's a romance. And I felt like I'd just been shredded because I'm writing this great suspense. She goes, no, the suspense is there. And I'm writing these amazing characters and these red herrings, and you don't know what's going on. She goes, no, it has all the mystery elements. But fundamentally, it's a romance. And it took me about 12 hours, seriously, to
process.
Because I'm like, but for 7 years, it's been a mystery. So now
that's like learning that
location mystery.
That's like finding out you were adopted at age.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was. I'm like, how do I explain this to the characters? And so the next day, like about 12 hours later, I thought about it, and I thought, okay, I'll take a look at it. It took me 2 more days before I could open up the manuscript again and look at it through her eyes with her notes. And as soon as I did, it was like this light bulb came on. It was like the meeting I told you about in California, where I first realized I was a mystery writer. It was a California Writers Club, which was a group that I belonged to. And the speakers that day were Ann Perry and Victoria Zackheim. And they talked about how they both write mysteries and the differences in their writing styles and whatnot. And that's when it clicked. I'm a writer. And I remember thinking that day, it was like, you've been waiting and writing this. It's been like being in a waiting room of a doctor's office for so long. And finally, he comes to you and he examines you and he says, you've got this. And at that moment, I was diagnosed as being a mystery writer. And it's not a disease that you have to be afraid of. It's a diagnosis that now I have this information. I know what to do and how to proceed. I'm not science fiction. I'm not fantasy. I'm a mystery writer. Well, I am, but I'm also very romantic about it. And I can see that now, reading the manuscript back, I can see that. So NOLA started out with a character name, and then I decided it was going to be a short story. And the more I got into it for like just a day and a half, I thought there's no way this can be just a short story. Back 7 years ago, I was writing short stories a lot. And I thought, no, I've always known I was going to finally write something. So like a big novel. So this is my debut novel, and it is NOLA set in New Orleans. So.
And it's the first in a series, right?
It is going to be the first in a series. It is what I call the city series. And the reason I call it that is because the setting itself is so integral. These stories cannot be told anywhere else. If you were to take the storyline and the characters and the plot out of New Orleans and put them, say, in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Detroit, Michigan. It's a completely different story. It would just be a story. And I would have to remove some of the elements because they don't make sense. I have woven, as you said at the beginning, I've woven a little bit of voodoo and hoodoo. It's not a dark story. It's not horrible. I don't think so.
But that little bit of dark mystery, supernatural element is part of what New Orleans. It's part of the setting. It's having integrity with the setting.
Right. And New Orleans has a mythical creature called the Rougarou, which is basically their version of a werewolf. So that figures prominently into the story. So you have, and it's not a vampire werewolf type story. It's just how the people's belief in it. It is a murder mystery, there is a death that has to be solved, and there are people that may or may not fall in love along the way. But a real romance isn't just boy meets girl, boy gets girl, boy ends up with girl.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I call romance in real life. I mean, there are some very flawed characters here. There's very bad behavior from good people and good behavior from some bad people. And then there's the Rougarou, and you have voodoo, and it's New Orleans. I am not going to lie. There is some heavy drinking going on in this book. I'm just saying, my girl, she likes her hurricanes.
Hey, she's on vacation in New Orleans. We can't fault her for that.
Right, exactly. And you had asked me previously, how did I come about this with the research because it is a location mystery. How did I come about with the research? I have never been to New Orleans. I have never been there. I've wanted to go, especially since writing the book. I intentionally stayed away from people went in the beginning, and even through up until about a year ago, would post on my timeline on Facebook or in my social media or send me email links to stories that they found. I did not want to be influenced in any manner whatsoever other than how I needed the book to go. So I found the New Orleans Tourism Bureau, which is Visit New Orleans online, and they are on Twitter, and they have a website. And I reached out to them on the very first day and said, I'm writing, I still have the tweet. I took a photo of the tweet. I said, hey, I'm writing a short story set in New Orleans. And they said, very cool. Let us know if you need any advice. And from that moment on to this day, 7 years later, I can post a tweet to them and say, I need to know this place, or what kind of place, or what is this, or where would my character go for that? And they have been very helpful in giving me links to information.
Wow. That's really awesome. That's like an invaluable asset when you're especially when setting is so prominent. And honestly, in any type of book, maybe not as intensely woven in with the story as it is with Nola, but with any type of book, the setting should be a character in the novel. I mean, it should be something that you cannot do without in the story. Right.
I think, honestly, any story is a location story. If it's not, then you're lacking and your story is not going to uphold. Because even if it's a fictional world or hometown USA, well, what makes it hometown? When like that, if you say hometown, somebody's going to think Americana, flags, ice cream in the 4th of July, snowball fights in the winter. Those are elements that you can find anywhere. But what your characters do with those elements and how they do them, that's what's going to make it into that setting.
And also, it's very specific. Are you talking about hometown USA in California, in the Midwest, in the South, in New England? Each of those would be very, very different from each other.
Right. There's the natural environment. There's the climate, the atmosphere.
Exactly.
New Orleans is very
the mindset of the people. That's something that I'm sure played very heavily into Nola. I mean, a mystery and a romance, I've heard Aaron say this a lot, in the South is not the same as one in Los Angeles, and it's not the same as one in New York. People have different mindset. The whole psychology of the culture is different.
Exactly. You in New Orleans, and even out here in the South, now that I'm in South Carolina, and I'm realizing that I've got bullfrogs out my balcony that I can hear every night, and cicadas, and I can watch lightning bugs and fireflies, same thing.
But people, especially when they're talking about a different setting, don't realize that those differences are there. I've lived in South Carolina my whole life. I don't even most of the time realize that those things are there just because they've always been there. Whereas if I went to California, I would probably be, trying to figure out the right word, not alarmed, but, surprised at a lot of the differences in the environment there. You've talked about having scorpions in your backyard and living on the desert. And
scorpions and rattlesnakes and black widow spiders.
Exactly.
And out there, it's a dry heat. But for the last 3 years, we were seeing summers where it got up to, I lived in the desert, of course, so it was 110, 115, 118 degrees. So in New Orleans,
118 degrees in California is not the same as 118 degrees.
No, it's not. Because in the desert of California, there's almost no humidity. And I say almost, it's true. The thunderstorms where I lived were off in the distance. We could see them, but they hardly ever actually fell on my yard. My family, my mother lived exactly 1 mile away. I would get rain and she wouldn't, or she would get wind and I wouldn't. I mean, there's that dynamic there. So even in that, learning that, the characters in any culture, you have a language difference, you have a food preference. What are the cultures in New Orleans? And you said it, beignets. But you know what? They also drink chicory. They drink chicory with their coffee. It's a thing.
I asked. Chicory
is a plant that they grind up and they mix in with their coffee grounds, and so it makes it really strong. It's got an earthy taste to it. I love it. I absolutely love it. So there's chicory. In fact, Café du Monde, the original Café du Monde in particular on Decatur Street, they are open 24 hours a day, and they are known for their beignets and chicory. I love them so much, I ordered me a cup from them. So
I will tell you, I don't know how similar to the actual coffee that's served there, their little K-cup pods. My boss will buy those because he loves them. And when I first started working, he took out the box. He said, "You like coffee, right?" Because he's heard me say, I drink coffee black. And he's like, "Try this." And I could not finish the cup because it was so strong.
That was probably the chicory then,
That must have been what it was. Strong. I mean, delicious, but the strongest coffee I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
But it does.
And they even have different words for their food. Like in California, we would just, call it sauce or something. Well, they actually take their leftovers in a sauce. They call it debris. So if you're frying up like any kind of meat dish, and it's got that little bit of runoff, not even just the fat fryings, not like bacon fryings, but a little fat, a little gravy with a little meat bit, they serve that it's debris. They serve it as a topping. They've got the red beans and rice. They got the muffaletta, which is an Italian sandwich spread on a great Italian loaf. There's so many different food items that also went into writing, because one of my characters owns a restaurant. And I, of course, I love food. I love cooking for so many people. I've got my cookbook out. And so to be able to take my personal passion for food and give that to one of my characters, that he in turn has a passion for food and feeding people and having a community table. That was a way that I could put a little bit of me into a male character in a setting that I'd never been in, but it works.
Exactly. And now that you're in the South, food, of course, is king. Of course, it is everywhere. But
I've had this discussion with a couple of people. Being from California, I do miss. There are very few authentic Mexican restaurants out in South Carolina. But you guys got chicken on every single corner, and sometimes 3.
That's true.
I really thought that was like, that's a stereotype. That's one of those things that people say. But I cannot get away from Bojangles and Chick-fil-A and Zaxby's. They are everywhere.
See, I didn't realize that was just a Southern thing, though. I mean, of course, you got fried chicken, KFC, stuff like that, I guess, is iconic to the South. But I didn't think just chicken restaurants in general were not this common.
Right. Yeah. Well, a KFC is out in California, but not the other 3, not Chick-fil-A. I think there's one Chick-fil-A where I used to live, but it was like 30, 40 miles away, and y'all aren't going to go there on a weekday, and they're closed on Sundays, so you don't go after church. So I never had Chick-fil-A except here in South Carolina. I know.
That's terrible.
I have a cute little side story about KFC. So I'm ancient. I'm much older than I look. And when I was very young, living in Minnesota, my dad had a friend who was older, and he looked like Colonel Sanders. And that was when it was not KFC, but it wasn't abbreviated. It was Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yep.
And one day my dad says, so-and-so is coming over for dinner tonight. And I can't remember the guy's name. It was Earl or John or something like that, but it was a simple name to remember. It was one syllable, I think. But my dad was adamant that we do not call him Colonel Sanders. He is not Colonel Sanders. Do not call him that. Over and over and over, just all day long. Do not call him that. That's not his name. And this poor man who looked like Colonel Sanders decided to show up wearing a white coat and bring it up.
Did he know about the joke, or was
I don't think he even understood. I don't know if he did it on purpose or what, but I do remember now I was very, very young. I think it must have been only 4 years old because I don't remember it very clearly, but I do remember him walking in the door and I looked up at him and I remember turning to my dad and said, "You lied, he is Colonel Sanders." And I don't remember what happened after that.
In a book, somewhere, somehow, a short story, a book, something.
Yeah. I love telling that. So my dad was full of stories. So I got a lot of good stories from my dad like that. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Now you're an organic writer, right?
Yes. Yes.
How did that affect how you wrote NOLA? Because I know there's a lot of different styles to that. Some people are hard outliners. Some people are all the way like to the Stephen James end of the spectrum where it's completely seat of the pants writing, and then some people go kind of in the middle. Which one are you?
So honestly, when I'm writing, I either know what's going to happen or I don't, but I never outline, with the exception of if I'm at work or if I'm away from my writing desk, if I'm in the kitchen or if I'm at the store, if I'm outside and I can't write, I'll make notes in a notebook or on a Post-it note or something, and I'll keep track of something I want to happen or that I know is going to happen. But I very rarely will outline something and then try to figure out what happens next. It just comes to me as I'm writing. And
I'm pretty much the same way. I have a hard time going into something not knowing the ending, just because my brain, whenever I'm in story writing mode, is constantly churning around ideas. And so I basically end up accidentally plotting out, if not all of the story, most of the story, without even really putting effort into. I mean, of course, there's effort ironing out all the details, but most of like the ideas and the flow of it, usually what I end up doing is just typing up a stream of consciousness, just like no bullet points, just putting everything that's in my head out on paper just so it doesn't get lost.
I'll get little snippets of a scene or dialogue and conversation. Oh, that's good. I'm going to write that and I'm going to use it. Or just a one line. There were times where one of my very, very good friends out in California, her name is Mary Ruth Hughes, and she was part of the California Writers Club. I adore her to pieces and I miss her greatly. And she wrote the Tishomingo series and she self-published it. So she was a big help to me. Now, what she did was she wrote about the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma at the turn of the 1900s.
Okay.
And her characters were so realistic, and because that's who she is. She's Chickasaw from that era, that country. And so she basically took stories of her ancestors and worked it into a novel, into a 3-part series.
That's really good.
It is so authentic that the Smithsonian gave her an endorsement.
Oh wow, that's very authentic.
Yeah, and so trusting her organic, because she would be organic and we would get together once every week or every 2 weeks, and we'd have dinner and we would just talk it out and say, it'd be like if you were here, I'd say, okay, Caleb, I have this scene. And I know I want to get from here to there, but I don't know how to fill it. And we just talk and hash it out.
And that's honestly where most story breakthroughs can come through, is when you're not trying to force your brain, when you're just letting it flow.
Yeah. And I find that to have a small committed amount of people that are on your team that you can ask for feedback and brainstorm with. It could be one person, it could be 5 people. I would recommend no more than 8 to 10 people in your very intimate writing circle. And you don't even have to meet all at once. Like I say, okay, Caleb, you come to dinner and we're going to hash out your book. And then I'll call Mary Ruth or message her and say, remember that scene you read a few years ago? And she's helped me. Even after my moving, I've been able to say, hey, I can't grasp this. I want to finish it. And I know what the ending is, but I don't know how to write it. In my head at the beginning of the story, I knew it was a murder mystery. So I knew who died, and I knew who I wanted my readers to think did it, and I knew who did do it. But I didn't know how to tell that story. Never, ever do I write the end of the story before. I'm very linear in my writing.
Yeah, I've done the same. I mean, I may know what happens, but I feel almost like I'm betraying the characters by writing it first. Like I need to go through it with them, in real time in order to know who they are at the end, or really, because there's no way to know exactly how a character is going to react to a situation at the end of the book if you haven't been with them step by step all through the book. You may know like overall the changes that they're going to have, but unless you have it almost like an experience, like you or I wouldn't necessarily react to the same situation today the same way we would have 2 or 3 years ago, because you change and you evolve as a person, and your personality, your decisions, what drives you. And the same thing's true with your characters. And there's no way to really be authentic to that unless you let them walk the journey out with you. I mean, that's just how I feel on that. And some people do it differently. I've seen some people who write in reverse. I can't imagine doing that. That would drive me crazy. But it's like, what whatever gets your juices flowing, whatever actually works for your story.
It got to the point where I'm also very compulsive about my writing, where because I'm so linear, until chapter 1 is done, I won't move on to chapter 2.
I'm the same way.
And then I get through chapter 5 and realize now I need to go back and fix chapter 2 because there was something. And my mentor, of course, is Aaron Gansky. And he and I have known each other for many, many years. And he mentored me at the start of really working through NOLA, until it got to the point where all I was doing was sending him materials that I had rewritten. I reworked chapters 1 through 5. And I think I honestly rewrote chapter 1 8 different ways was the final count before he and my critique group said, stop, we're done. We want to know what happens after this. We don't care that there was a typo or that you changed this sentence or that sentence. We're reading the same thing over and over, and now we're dead to it. You can only read the same story so many times within a short amount of a short amount of time span
it's like listening to the same song over and over again. It just loses meaning. It loses impact.
Yeah, you find yourself singing along and you don't even know you're doing it.
Exactly. So, and you don't want to do that with a story, because then you're not experiencing it, even as the writer anymore.
Exactly. So it was really hard, but after I moved here, I did it. I didn't look back. I sat down and I wrote it out, and it killed me. I mean, it was torturous for me because, yes, I'm organic, but I'm also linear, and I'm also a perfectionist.
Exactly.
And as soon as that first time that I finally got there and I wrote the end, I was like, I had to call everybody in the world and be like, look what I just did. I was screaming. It was so exciting.
Now, and as somebody, I know this is your first novel. I'm in the middle of my first novel, so I haven't reached the end triumphant point yet. But from that end of the journey, does the real work start at the end of the first draft, like everyone says?
I honestly, knowing myself, I think I put off writing the end, like literally the words the end. I put off finishing the book. I had 2/3 of it, 3/4 of it done, and then I kept going back and making changes. And I think part of that was because I've lived with these characters for so long. And when you're a deep writer, when you're an organic writer, you feel it, you live it. You're not just putting words on paper. This is your soul. You are giving birth to these babies. And if I write the end, if I finish it, they're gone. They're leaving home. I'm living alone again. And I've had these people in my head, in my heart, in my home for 7 years. And
they become part of you. I mean,
and writing the book, we talk about the location influencing what I was writing, but being a writer influenced my music that I've listened to, the movies that I've watched, the food that I've eaten. It has influenced how I decorate my home. I'm very New Orleans, Mardi Gras, Bohemian. I am very much there, even though I've never been in New Orleans. And so to write the end and give up my characters I thought would be terrible. But as soon as I did it, I realized it was this joy, because now they come alive. Now comes the fun part of seeing, did I grow them up well? And it is not the real work, as you asked. It is a different work. And it's so fun. It's absolutely fun. And of course, that I love marketing and advertising just as much as writing, which for writers, most of them prefer to just be the writers. I love the outreach, the networking, the marketing. And so I have been having so much fun.
On the side anyway.
I do. I do.
Are a publicist for several different authors, I believe. So, I mean, that's to do that for your own. I guess it's akin, I mean, of course, I'm not a parent yet, but I guess it's akin to raising your children, pouring your heart and soul into them, and then continuing a relationship with them after they're adults. Being friends with them as they're adults, and that sort of transition. It's not so much here comes the real job. it's more of a transition in what your relationship with those characters in that story is.
That is a great way to put it. It is a transition. It's a different relationship, but it's a wonderful relationship. After I wrote it, then I turned it over to the editor, and I promised I would not read it until she came back to me with notes. And we went round, I think we went through 3 or 4 rounds, because the first one she came back, she had some great edits. The second one, she came back and she said, look, she had to take me out to lunch and sit me down, talk to me face to face. She says, I don't want to scare you, but you're a romance writer. And
sit down, have a glass of water.
I had the stereotypical image of a murder she wrote type romance writer sitting at an old clacky typewriter at a Victorian desk, pink lace curtains everywhere. And that is not me. I am streamlined. I am quick. I am bohemian. I'm a hurricane. I'm all of that. But I am not this cute, soft, lacy, frilly, little puffy, put me in roses everywhere kind of romance writer. But then Yolanda came alongside me.
You can start your own subgenre. You can be you can start edgy romance. That can be.
No, because that's an entirely different category, and we don't touch that.
Oh, sorry.
No, but that's where Yolanda said, but that's what makes my characters real and authentic. They're not lacy. They're not frilly and pretty roses all the time. They are really authentic characters who happen to decide if it's worth falling in love or not. And past loves affect their current relationships. So do they want to continue? Because remember, Penny came out of an uncle dying on her and an abusive relationship. And now these people that she's friends with, somebody's dead. So why do you want to open up your heart to anything like that? So the story of Nola, as I'm writing this, solving a murder mystery, actually that's secondary. The story is, does Josie and those around her, because they've been hurt too. So, you know, does she trust people again? Does she not? Does she decide that she good enough on her own? You know, at what point do you need people? Do people need you? And at what point do you say, I'm okay the way it is?
Exactly. And at some point I feel like it's a journey of self-discovery, just because at the same time as she's dealing with all these scars, she's meeting all these people, you've got that almost honeymoon stage adrenaline rush of new city, new people, fresh start in life. And I'm guessing she's having to ask herself, is this chapter 2, or is this just a reprieve and all of this going to fall away? I mean, I assume there's a little bit of that uncertainty in there where she's rediscovering who she is as a person with no real attachments. She said her uncle passed away. She just got out of a relationship. It's sort of a new phase in her life, and she's sort of discovering who she is. And that's New Orleans is a wonderful atmosphere for that. The uncertainty, the mystery, all of that.
Well, one of my favorite quotes that I wrote for the character, now her name is Penny Jo, but people call her Josie. But one of my favorite quotes that I had from her from the beginning is when she sees a firefly and she's so enamored by it. She says, I want to be a firefly, to bring so much light into the world, if for no other reason than it's what I was born to do. They know no other way to exist than to just be themselves. And I find that a little sad, because at what point does a person wish to be a firefly in order to make life better? You know, but that's what she's going through, that she would rather be an insect, a bug, a creature that has a lifespan of months as opposed to years. But she can also see the goodness in that short duration of a life because of what it is and what they do, you know. So,
and that gives a lot of depth to the character and the character too. And I know you said you are self-publishing. What did you discover about self-publishing that maybe surprised you, and why did you choose to go down that route as opposed to a traditional publisher?
In California, I started New Inklings Press when I curated the unemployment cookbook years ago, and that was long before I started NOLA. I started a publishing company for several reasons, and the first was that I started the brand because you cannot get on a brick and mortar bookshelf without an imprint. So even though I self-publish, and it's self-published, if I just went in and said, by Molly Jo Realy, bookstores cannot take it. They have to have a company that they can come back at. So they come back to New Inklings Press as the publisher. If I say Molly Jo Realy is the publisher, well, no, she's not. She's the writer.
Okay.
So that was the
And
first.
I didn't realize. So that's an actual rule of the trade. Like they're not
It is.
to accept something without some sort of an imprint.
Correct. Because they need to have if you're spending the money, because anything you do like that, you have to have business licenses and sales and use tax and all that. So they know you're invested into being serious about it, but they also need to have a place that an entity that they can ship returns to if they need to return the book. Let's say Barnes and Nobles locally back in Victorville, California would buy 20 copies to put on their shelves. If they don't sell them, they want to give them back to me. Well, they can contact Molly Jo Realy, but as the author, I'm not buying back my books. No, you bought my books.
You're not legally obligated to buy back your books, but as
a company, yeah. And sometimes it's not even a buyback. It's just a way for them to return them or whatnot. So.
And it also gives you a mark of professionalism. Yes. As a because I mean, self-publishing is something that can be done very, very well, and you can be very successful at and become very well known for. Or it can be something that amateurs do just because they want to get something out there. So that also gives tilts it a little bit more so that they see that you are one of the professional self-published writers.
Yeah, yes. And I chose the name New Inklings Press. Press, of course, because of publication. The Inklings was the writers group that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien belonged to when they wrote Narnia and the Lord of the Rings trilogies. And
now, what was it? Just a group, or was it an actual like?
It was a writers' club that they formed or helped form, and like were a part of their what?
I said sort of like a critique group, like Word Weavers, or
yeah. It was a private critique group where they supported and encouraged each other, and I love the idea of that so much. And of course, the Narnia stories have influenced me greatly. I mean, it's just both of them, the Hobbit stories and the Narnia stories are great retelling of the gospel in a way that you don't even know you're hearing the gospel. And I think every good writing has some sort of storyline that lifts you upward, lifts you toward greatness. And I just really liked the idea of that. So I formed the New Inklings Writers Group Critique Club out there, and had some people join. Becky Lindsay, one of our favorite authors for YA. She was one of my founding members. Very, very happy to have edited her first book for her and worked on her.
Very well. As a matter of fact, isn't her third book in the series coming out soon?
Her third book comes out just about the same time that Nola comes out, so we are cheering for each other. I am so proud.
And I remember at Blue Ridge about, I think it was my first year back in 2017, I think it was. Was it 2017? I think it was 2017. I remember sitting in the audience at the awards night when she got her first award. I think she got a Selah Award, or I forgot which one it was, but her book that ended up, and I don't even know if it had actually come out yet. It may have come out. I believe they call them the Founders Awards for unpublished authors. Unpublished. It was the unpublished author, and she got first place for debut novel.
Yeah.
And I remember both of you just cheering for one another, and to see both of you now, yours about to release. She's on her third book in her trilogy from that first book that won that award. It's amazing to see the journey that you guys have both taken together over that time, especially since you were friends from the very beginning when you first started, for her when she first started this.
We met because a mutual friend of ours asked me to speak at a ministry dinner on my penny parable and my cookbook, which I use as a ministry. And Becky was there, and I had met her. And so a few months later, she messaged me on Facebook and said, "Hey, do you remember me? I'd like to pick your brain on writing. I'll buy you Starbucks." I messaged her back and I said, "Honey, if you buy me Starbucks, we'll be friends for life." So here's this one, and Becky is
that's the way to Molly's heart, by the way, Starbucks. That is
pretty much
the way to her heart is a trip to Starbucks.
It would be it. Yeah, absolutely. So we met at a Starbucks, and she bought me a coffee, and we sat down and we were talking, and 15 minutes into it, and she's just talking, and I interrupted her mid-sentence. She doesn't know me. She didn't know my personality or anything, and she's very reserved and introverted, and I just blew her away. And I said, "God interrupt you?" She's like, "What did I do? What's wrong?" You know, kind of a thing, like she was apprehensive. I said, "No, you're fine." I said, "But I have learned that when God tells me to tell somebody something else, just do it. So I'm sorry I interrupted, but here's the thing. You are going to be a great writer." And she's like, "Oh." And I said, no, I'm telling you. And I can't remember what else there was to that. But I also looked at her and I said, "Have you heard of the Blue Ridge Writers Conference?" And she goes, "No." And I said, "Okay.
You're going."
This was in February. The conference is in May. And this was in 2014. I knew I wasn't going in 2014, but I was already planning to go in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at her and I tell her, and I said, "It's 15 months away." And I said, "You're going with me. And oh, by the way, you and I are going to be best friends." And she goes, "I have to talk to my husband about all that." You know, and sure enough, the next year, she and I showed up at Blue Ridge together, best friends. And she has been an amazing sounding board for me. I'm so thrilled. I do admit, and she knows, it's a little bit of jealousy. She was published before me, but she worked it. I mean, she worked night and day to write her book, but she took the courses. She's taking courses, and now she's editor of the SoCal Christian Voice online magazine. So she's living the dream. She's really pushing it, and she
is an amazing writer, amazing person. She's just a joy to talk with. You can tell the passion that she has for it. It's not, I mean, it's more than a hobby. It's more than a job. It's her passion, really. It's her dream. So it is. You can tell that in the results that she gets and how successful her books have been.
Yeah, and I'm so proud of her. She's really done it and worked for it, and I can't begin to explain how great it was to see over the course of just a few years go from this person who wanted to pick my brain to exceeding me, to excelling and getting published, and her Bible study, they self-published, her and Patty Shell and two others, and all of this stuff. I'm just so very pleased and proud of her. And now both of our books are coming out at about the same time. That's super exciting.
Where can people go to find more about Nola and you? I know you've got a blog, you've got a couple of different things going on there.
Yeah, so I have several websites. Honestly, right now they're all kind of being revamped because of launching the book. But the best way to find me in any of my links is on Facebook. Just Google my name, Molly Jo Realy with one L. I am all over social media. I'm on Facebook as Molly Jo Realy, author, etc. I'm on, my blog is franklymydearmojo.com. I do have a website, mollyjoreally.com. That's a little statement. I'm going to change that. And pretty soon, my other website is newinglingspress.com, which was kind of a vanity website for the cookbook and just to keep the company going. But now that it's licensed here in South Carolina and the book's coming out, I'm going to be revamping that over the next week. So any of those places. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Pinterest. So find me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I love talking to you as always. It's always fun, and I cannot wait to read Nola when it comes out.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I really loved being here.
Well, thank you guys for watching Genre Chat, and we will see you next time.